Hi. D.A. Carson, a New Testament scholar, deals with the text of 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verses 33b to 36, in the 6th chapter of this book that I've been reading portions from, Recovering Biblical Manhood and Womanhood. His chapter is Silent in the Churches. I'll read the text under discussion before we get into what he is saying. As in all the churches of the saints, let your women keep silent in the churches, for they are not permitted to speak, but they are to be submissive, as the law also says. And if they want to learn something, let them ask their own husbands at home, for it is shameful for women to speak in church. Or did the word of God come originally from you? Or was it you only that it reached? So that's those verses. He starts with this statement in his introduction. The interpretation of 1 Corinthians 14, 33b to 36 is by no means easy. The nub of the difficulty is that in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 2 to 16, Paul is quite prepared for women to pray and prophesy, albeit with certain restrictions. But here, a first reading of the text seems to make the silence he enjoins absolute. The solutions that have been advanced are, like the devil's in certain instances of demon possession, legion. I can do no more than list a few and mention one or two of my hesitations about them, before turning to the interpretation I find most contextually and exegetically secure. So here the first piece is about text critical question. So he has a subheading called that. He says, a number of scholars have noted the complexities of the textual evidence supporting the authenticity of these verses and have dismissed verses 34 to 36, or some part of them, as a late gloss of no relevance in establishing Pauline theology. Not a few of these writers exercise a similar source-critical skill with all the other passages in the Pauline corpus that seem to restrict women in any way. The authentic Paul, they argue, is the Paul of the passages like 1 Corinthians 11, 2 to 6, and Galatians 3, verses 27 onward. I confess I am always surprised by the amount of energy and ingenuity expended to rescue Paul from himself and conform him to our image. In any case, the view that verses 34 to 36 contain a major gloss is so much a minority report, especially since all manuscripts include the passage, that until recently, most discussions and refutations could afford to be cursory. In short, most were satisfied that, whatever the textual complexities, the evidence that these verses are original and in their original location, and not, as in some manuscripts, with verses 34 to 35 placed after 1440, is substantial. So I should read that without the bracketed part. In short, most were satisfied that, whatever the textual complexities, the evidence that these verses are original and in their original location is substantial. That's his point. Now he mentions some manuscripts put these verses after 1440, which is the last verse in the chapter. He goes, with the publication of the recent and generally excellent commentary by Fee, however, the view that verses 34 to 35 constitute a non-Pauline interpolation has gained wider credence. Before turning to interpretations of the text as it stands, it has become important to think through the reasoning of those who omit it. The relevant textual evidence is quickly stated. Verses 34 to 35 appear in all known manuscripts, either in their present location or, in the case of all Western witnesses, after verse 40. Although the overwhelming majority of manuscripts support the placement of verses 34 to 35 after verse 33, one must offer an explanation of the Western textual tradition. Fee's solution is that when the epistle came from Paul's hands, the verses were not there, but were added later. They were an early marginal gloss, that is, a later editor's addition written in the margin, subsequently inserted into the text at two different places. Fee judges that good historical reasons are available to support this position. The gloss itself, quite apart from the location of its insertion, may well have been created toward the end of the 1st century to achieve a reconciliation between 1 Timothy chapter 2 and 1 Corinthians chapter 14, or to thwart a rising feminist movement, the existence of which some find attested to in 1 Timothy chapter 2. If Fee's reconstruction of events is correct, the gloss must have been extraordinarily early to have managed to find its way into every manuscript. This becomes rather unlikely under the assumption that the gloss was inserted at the end of the 1st century, by which time this epistle had been circulating for 4 decades. It is hard to believe that none of the earlier copies had any influence on the 2nd and 3rd century textual traditions to which we have access. Most commentators are rightly reluctant, therefore, to postulate an original omission where no manuscripts have come down to us attest the omission. Moreover, most glosses of substantial size, like this one, seek to explain the text or clarify the text or elucidate the text. They do not introduce major problems of flow into the text. The difficulty is so great in this case that we are asked to believe in a glossator who is biblically informed enough to worry about harmonization with 1 Timothy chapter 2, but who is so thick he cannot see that he is introducing a clash between 1 Corinthians 14 and 1 Corinthians chapter 11. All right, a little bit more of what he says here. He says this position must explain how the two passages, 11 verses 2 to 16, and 14, the verses that we just read at the beginning, 33b to 36, can stand consistently in the same letter, each within its own context. Fee forcefully rejects this approach because he insists on taking "they are not allowed to speak" as an absolute statement that cannot be reconciled with chapter 11, verses 2 to 16. At the merely formal level, of course, he is right. The statement is absolute. But qualifications to a statement can be present even when they are not part of the syntactical unit in question. The qualifications may be part of the larger context or the flow of the arguments. In other words, there may be discourse considerations. Consider, for example, 1 John 3, verse 9. No one who is born of God will continue to sin, because God's seed remains in him, and he cannot go on sinning, because he has been born of God. We may agree that the meaning of God's seed could be taken a couple of different ways, and that the NIV rendering, just cited, exaggerates the force of the present tense verbs. But after all our caveats are in, this is an extraordinarily strong statement. Even so, responsible exegesis must not only fit it into the flow of 1 John chapter 3, but also take note of 1 John 1, verses 6, 8, and 10, where all pretensions of sinless perfection are specifically denied. So also here, the prohibition in 1 Corinthians 14:34 is strong, but as we shall see, the context argues it is not as strong as he thinks. Moreover, the sanction granted to women to pray and prophesy in 1 Corinthians 11, verses 2 to 16, has one or two more curbs on it than Fee thinks. In the last analysis, Fee's judgment based on intrinsic probability are in part the result of his insistence on an absolute disjunction between two texts, where more sympathetic exegesis sees a way forward. The disjunction he draws is not demanded by the text. It is self-generated. That's as much as I'll read this time on those specific verses. My previous two videos were actually on chapter 11, verses 2 to 16, so we won't go through that again. If you want, you can listen to those two videos, the two previous ones. I'm going to link two videos regarding text, whether they're omitted or added. The witnesses have a version of this problem. So I've linked a Ray Franz video. Ray Franz asks why none of 5,000 ancient Greek texts has Jehovah. And this is from readings we were doing from In Search of Christian Freedom. The second one is a video where I was reading from C.S. Lewis's essay, Fern Seed and Elephants. This one is called My 28 Years as a Jehovah's Witness Not Wasted. I learned the hard way the value of critical biblical discernment. So Lewis is talking about his own expertise in criticism of ancient texts, but in literature, and comparing it with what some have done with New Testament criticism. Usually more, I don't know what the word is. I can't think of it, but you'll get the gist of it when you watch it. Thank you.